In the dark cold of space, a single human ship floated quietly. It was small, nothing like the big warships from Earth's past. Inside, young Lieutenant David Reed sat alone in the command chair, staring at the stars. He was the messenger, the last hope for peace between Earth and the Zor Alliance. His heart beat fast, but he kept his face calm. His orders were clear: deliver Earth's peaceful message, offer a chance to avoid war, and wait for their answer. The Zor were a tall, thin, gray-skinned alien race. They ruled many worlds and had always looked down on humans. They believed humans were soft, weak, too emotional. But now, after several small border fights, they had called for a meeting. David's ship was the answer. The message he carried was a simple one. We do not want war, but we will defend ourselves if forced. As his ship neared the Zor fleet, David saw their ships appear on his screens, massive, sharp-edged, and covered in weapons. He took a deep breath. "This is Lieutenant Reed of Earth. I come in peace," he said over the open channel. There was a pause. Then, a cold, crackling voice answered, "You may approach." David's ship docked with the Zor command vessel. Alone, with only his small translator device, he stepped into the alien airlock. The Zor soldiers stood around him, silent, their dark eyes watching. They led him to the main chamber, where the Zor commanders sat on high metal thrones. David stood tall, holding the small data crystal in his hand. "This is Earth's offer. We wish to avoid war. We offer peace." His voice echoed in the large, cold room. The Zor leader, a tall figure with a long scar down his face, rose slowly. His lips twisted into something like a smile, but not a kind one. "We have received your message," the Zor leader said softly. He stepped closer, looking down at the human. "And this is our answer." Before David could react, the Zor guards moved. In a flash, sharp weapons pierced his chest. His eyes went wide with shock. He gasped, trying to speak, but no words came. The data crystal fell from his hand, hitting the ground with a soft clink. The last thing David saw was the cold smile of the Zor leader. Back on Earth, in a silent, underground command center, rows of generals and analysts watched the signal feed. They saw David step forward, deliver the message. They saw him stand tall, hopeful, and they saw him fall. The room went cold. The signal cut. General Marcus Hale, a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes, stood slowly. His face was hard, but his hands tightened into fists. Around him, officers watched, waiting. He spoke quietly, his voice cold as steel. They killed the messenger. The room filled with quiet sounds as red lights lit up across the panels. Commands were given, codes unlocked. All over Earth, hidden silos opened, deep space beacons flashed, and silent ships hidden under the ice caps came to life. In orbit, a fleet of black ships, invisible to most sensors, shifted position. For years, Earth had prepared quietly, secretly. The Zor had believed Earth was weak, but Earth had learned to prepare for the worst. A young officer at the console turned, pale. "General, do we wait for further orders?" General Hale shook his head slowly. "No. Begin Project Last Dawn." Far away, deep under the oceans, massive submarines stirred. In secret bases on the moon, engineers activated engines that had been cold for years. Across Mars, factories turned to full power, loading weapons and supplies. The news spread through. Military channels: the Zor killed the messenger. The Zor have chosen war. On the far edge of the solar system, human scout ships went dark, slipping into stealth mode. They were no longer part of the known world. They had become shadows, ghosts, preparing to strike. Inside a small room on Earth, General Hale sat quietly. For a moment, his fingers tapping on the table. His eyes were fixed on the last frozen image of David Reed. standing tall, proud, offering peace. He whispered, almost to himself, "They think they won." Above him, in orbit, a command ship powered up, its engines humming softly. The stars shifted as the fleet moved, silent, hidden, waiting. On the Zor homeworld, the leaders sat back, laughing softly. To them it was simple: one dead human, one destroyed offer. Earth would be too scared to fight back. They would submit, or they would fall quickly. After all, the Zor had ruled the stars for centuries. But far away, on a small blue planet, a storm was rising. The humans were coming, not with words, not with peace. This time, they would come with fire. And the galaxy had no idea what was about to begin. Far above Earth, hidden among the cold stars, the first wave of human warships moved into position. These were not the ships the galaxy had seen before. They were silent, black, sharp-edged, made for one purpose only: war. No lights showed on their hulls, no signals left their antennas. To alien scanners, they were nothing but shadows, ghosts slipping through the night. In the command room deep under Earth's surface, General Marcus Hale stood before the great screen, watching the movements. His face was tight, his jaw hard. Around him, officers worked quickly, their voices low. Across the world, Earth was preparing for a war it had never wanted, but had always feared. The Zor believed the humans were slow to respond, weak in strength, clumsy in battle. They believed the humans were still using old, outdated ships and weapons. What the Zor didn't know was that Earth had spent years building in secret. On Mars, on the Moon, deep under the oceans, humans had created the Last Dawn fleet, a force built from their best minds, their darkest fears, and their strongest will. Families were moved into underground shelters. Factories switched from civilian work to full war production. Massive transport ships, hidden for decades under ice and rock, broke free from their coverings, engines roaring to life. Across the military networks, soldiers received their orders. They packed their gear, checked their weapons, and boarded their ships. The mood across Earth was not one of fear. It was not even anger. It was something deeper, colder. They had tried peace. They had offered a hand, and the Zor had answered with blood. Now Earth would show the Zor what it meant to awaken a species that had fought through ice ages, plagues, world wars, and near extinction. On the far side of the solar system, small human scout ships slipped past alien sensors. These scouts were designed for one thing: to map out the enemy's weaknesses. Their stealth systems, built from strange materials and powered by experimental cores, allowed them to vanish from nearly every scan. To the Zor, they simply disappeared. Inside, one of these scouts, Captain Alara Singh, stared at her screens, watching the data flow in. Zor patrol routes, supply lines, weak points in their networks. Everything was being quietly recorded. She smiled coldly. "They have no idea we're here," she murmured. Her second-in-command, a young officer named Luis, nodded. "When do we strike, Captain?" Ilara's eyes narrowed. "Soon. But not yet. We let them think they're safe first." Back on the Zor homeworld, the high commanders sat in their shining halls, drinking and laughing. Reports had come in. The human messenger was dead, Earth had gone silent, and there was no sign of a military response. The Zor believed they had crushed the human's spirit. Their generals sat back, relaxed, their minds already on the next conquest. But far away, in the cold dark, human fleets were shifting. Orders were given, codes were unlocked. Earth's leaders knew they couldn't match the Zor in numbers. But they didn't have to. They had learned long ago that survival was never about numbers. It was about using the right strike at the right time, in the right place. In a hidden base on Mars, engineers worked late into the night, preparing weapons that no one outside Earth had ever seen. Strange energy cores hummed, loading into torpedo bays. Giant railguns, the size of skyscrapers, were mounted onto the biggest ships. Even the old planetary defense cannons, long thought useless, were being powered up once more. General Hale stood before the great map, watching the pieces move. His fingers touched the table lightly. "They think we're weak," he said softly. "Let them keep thinking that." In the control room, a young officer looked up. "Sir, should we send a warning to the Zor? One last chance for peace?" Hale's eyes turned sharp. He shook his head. "No. We sent the message. They answered. Now, they'll hear our reply." In deep space, human ships flickered out of sight, their engines going dark as they entered full stealth. They became part of the black, a hidden force, waiting, watching. On one of the command ships, a veteran captain stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. He smiled faintly, remembering old Earth stories, old battles, old lessons. "They wanted war," he said quietly to himself. "Let's give them war." Back on the Zor worlds, life went on as usual. Markets were busy, ships moved from planet to planet, and soldiers patrolled lazily, thinking the humans had been dealt with. They didn't know that small human attack teams were already moving among them, cutting communications, setting traps, preparing the ground for something far bigger. Earth was not coming with diplomacy anymore. It was coming with silence, with shadows, and soon, with fire. The first move had been made, the humans were ready, and the galaxy was about to learn that Earth never forgot. In the deep cold of space, the Zor fleets drifted calmly, their crews relaxed. After all, they had crushed the humans' hope, hadn't they? The messenger was dead, Earth had gone quiet, and no ships had come to challenge them. The Zor commanders believed they had already won. To them, humans were slow, weak, emotional creatures, no match for the mighty Zor Empire. But the humans were not quiet because they were scared. They were quiet because they were waiting. Captain Ilara Singh watched the countdown on her screen. The scouts had finished mapping every weakness in the Zor patrol lines. Supply chains, fuel depots, shield generators, everything had been marked. She could feel the tension on her ship, the silent waiting like a coiled spring ready to snap. "Captain," Luis whispered beside her, "the time, it's almost here." Ilara gave a small, cold smile. "Yes, let's remind them who they're dealing with." Back on Earth, General Hale stood in the underground command center. Before him, the great screens lit up with dozens of ships moving silently into position. His voice was low but steady. "All units, begin." At first there was no sound, no light, nothing. Then, across the edges of the Zor territory, strange things began to happen. On one planet, a massive fuel depot suddenly exploded, tearing through Zor supply lines. On another, key communication satellites went dark as tiny human strike teams destroyed them from within. Across several systems, patrol ships simply disappeared, human stealth craft cutting them down before they could even send a warning. The Zor commanders sat up sharply, confused. Reports came in, one after another. Explosions, missing ships, silent sectors. Something was wrong, something big. But they didn't know what. In space, the hidden human fleet began to move. The FHB Last Dawn Fleet, Earth's strongest, deadliest ships, powered up their engines. Massive black warships, covered in strange armor, slipped from the dark. On board, human soldiers stood ready, armored and armed, their eyes hard. Captain Ilara's ship joined the fleet, her voice steady over the comms. "Phase 1 complete. We hit their supplies and eyes. Now comes Phase 2. Luis grinned. "We hit them where it hurts." On the Zor homeworld, alarms blared. The high commanders shouted, demanding answers. But no one had them. Human forces had struck so fast, so suddenly that even the mighty Zor intelligence network was blind. And then, the sky over several Zor worlds lit up. Human warships dropped out of stealth, opening fire with weapons the Zor had never seen. Giant railguns hurled solid metal slugs that punched through shields like paper. Energy weapons carved through armored ships. Smart missiles danced through defense grids, finding targets with deadly precision. For the first time in centuries, the Zor fleets were on fire. In the middle of the chaos, General Hale's voice echoed calmly through. "The command networks. Remember," he told his forces, "we did not start this war, but we will end it." Human Marines boarded Zor ships, fighting in brutal close combat. They were fast, trained, and fueled by a cold fury. Zor soldiers, used to easy victories, panicked. Captain Alara's ship led a strike against the Zor command station, slipping through the defense lines like a blade. "Target the command core," she ordered. Luis's hands flew over the controls, locking on. "Firing!" A massive shockwave rocked the station as human torpedoes hit home. Across the system, Zor command signals vanished. In that moment, the Zor Empire realized something terrible. The humans they had mocked, the humans they thought were weak, were not weak. They were angry, and they were coming. As fires burned across Zor systems and human ships pushed deeper, one Zor general sat frozen at his desk. His trembling fingers touched the edge of a screen showing the chaos. His voice was barely a whisper. We killed the messenger," he said. A younger officer turned pale. "Sir, what do we do?" The old general closed his eyes, his face falling into his hands. "We pray they stop." But far across the stars on Earth, General Hale's face was hard as stone. He knew better. There would be no stopping now. This was only the beginning. The Zor Empire, for the first time in generations, was in full panic. Entire star systems sent desperate calls for help, their skies filled with burning ships and falling debris. Zor soldiers scrambled to regroup, their commanders barking orders. But it was already too late. The humans had moved too fast, too precisely. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Earth's lead warship, Captain Alara Singh stood silently, watching the chaos on her screens. Zor cruisers were breaking formation, their defenses shattered. Giant supply stations were falling, their pieces, scattering like dust across the void. Luis, standing beside her, gave a low whistle. "I almost feel sorry for them." Ilara's eyes stayed cold. "Don't. They brought this on themselves." Back on Earth, in the underground war room, General Hale received fresh reports. His officers rushed back and forth, passing data. Hale stayed calm, eyes sharp as he traced the battle lines on the map. "They're breaking faster than we expected, sir," one officer said, surprised. "That's what happens," Hale murmured. "When you corner an enemy who thought you were weak, they're not ready for real resistance." The Zor commanders, scattered across their empire, frantically tried to send reinforcements. But human sabotage teams had done their work well. Communication lines were down, fuel stations gone, repair docks burning. The mighty Zor fleets were isolated, blind, and terrified. In orbit over a key Zor colony, human Marines stormed enemy cruisers. Inside one burning corridor, Sergeant Lena Voss led her squad through heavy fire, clearing rooms one by one. Her voice crackled through the comms. "Sector 3 clear, moving on." A younger Marine spoke up, nervous. "Sergeant, they're running. They're abandoning ship." Lena gave a grim smile. "Good. Let them run. We're here to take their heart." Back on the Zor homeworld, panic was spreading. Civilians packed the streets, watching the skies with wide, fearful eyes. Sirens wailed non-stop. Government leaders argued in their high towers, shouting over each other. "We should send a surrender message," one official cried. Another slammed his hand on the table. "No! We're the Zor Empire! We do not surrender to primitives." But deep down, they all knew. The Empire was crumbling. Meanwhile, far above, human warships kept striking, not with wild, angry attacks, but with calm, cold precision. They hit power grids, cut supply lines, isolated command centers. Everywhere the Zor looked, they saw their systems failing. Luis turned to Elara, a small frown crossing his face. "Captain, why are we holding back from full attack? We could burn their capital now." Elara shook her head slowly. "No, we're not here to destroy civilians. We're here to break their war machine." Her voice lowered. "We want them to know they lost, and why." Back on Earth, General Hale stood before his officers, his voice steady. "We don't bomb cities. We don't burn innocents. But we will crush their fleets, their armies, their pride. We will make sure they can never threaten Earth again." In deep space, another Zor fleet tried to regroup, pulling together their remaining ships. But human intelligence had already mapped their location. Without warning, black human warships appeared, tearing through them in minutes. Across every battlefield, the Zor began to understand the terrible truth. The humans had waited, prepared, and now they were unstoppable. In a dark Zor command bunker, an old warlord stared at the reports with hollow eyes. Around him, younger officers argued, panicking. He raised one trembling hand. "Enough!" His voice was dry, cracked. "Send a message." The room fell silent. "Wait, what message, sir?" The old warlord closed his eyes. "To Earth. To General Hale. To the humans." His shoulders sagged. "We surrender." But even as the message was prepared, far, across the stars on Earth, Hale's eyes narrowed. He knew something. This war wasn't over. Not yet. Far away, on Earth, General Hale sat silently in the command room, watching the surrender message blink on the main screen. Around him, his officers shifted nervously. Some looked relieved. Some were still tense. Hale's sharp eyes stayed, locked on the screen, his mind turning over every possibility. Luis's voice came through from the Indomitable. "Sir, the Zor have surrendered. Their ships are pulling back, their weapons going dark. Should we stand down?" Elara, standing beside Luis, stayed quiet, her arms crossed. She didn't trust it. Neither did Hale. "Not yet," Hale said calmly. "They killed the messenger. They broke trust. Let's wait." Across Zor space, human fleets held their positions, watching carefully. Zor ships, once proud and aggressive, drifted back toward their own borders. On Zor worlds, soldiers laid down their arms. Civilians peeked out of shelters, wondering if it was truly over. But deep beneath the Zor surface, in hidden bunkers, not everyone was ready to surrender. The Zor Supreme Commander, a tall, sharp-eyed creature named Velox, stood before his war council, his voice cold and cutting. "They think they've won," he hissed. "They think we've broken, but they have no idea what's waiting for them." His officers glanced at each other, confused. "Sir, we've lost half our fleets." Velox slammed a hand onto the table. "We've lost nothing," he barked. "We have the dread sun." A low, fearful murmur spread through the room. The dread sun was a secret Zor weapon, an ancient, massive device hidden for centuries. It was designed for one thing: burning planets. No fleet, no army, no shield could survive its fire. And now, Velox planned to unleash it. Back on the Indomitable, Elara frowned. Something was wrong. "Luis," she said quietly, "pull up scans. Look deeper. If they're really surrendering, why are there energy spikes on their homeworld?" Luis's fingers flew across the controls. His eyes widened. "Captain, there's a massive power buildup underground. It's huge. Ilara's face hardened. They're planning something. Her voice snapped over the comms. General Hale, we have a problem. They're stalling. They're charging. Some kind of superweapon. In the Earth Command Center, Hale's jaw tightened. His fingers tapped lightly on the table. He turned to his officers. Activate Plan Black. The room fell silent. Plan Black was Earth's most dangerous response. A set of hidden cards they'd held back for just this moment. From secret bases across the solar system, Earth's deepest weapons came online. Experimental stealth drones armed with planet-piercing warheads, high-orbit kinetic strikers, ready to fire metal rods from space at near-light speeds, and one hidden ship, the Valkyrie, carrying Earth's most advanced AI-driven attack systems, quietly emerged from the shadow of a distant moon. Ilara's voice came over the line. Orders, sir? Hale's voice was soft but firm. Hit them before they can hit us. Across the stars, human weapons moved. Stealth drones slipped through defenses. Kinetic strikers adjusted their aim. The Valkyrie aligned its systems. In the Zor bunker, Velox raised his arm. Fire the dread sun, he shouted, but the words had barely left his mouth when the ground shook. Deep below, explosions ripped through the dread sun's core as human stealth drones pierced its defenses and delivered their deadly payloads. Power surges flashed, alarms blared, and in the heart of the Zor homeworld, their greatest weapon died before it could be born. Velox spun, eyes wide. No! No! Above, Zor officers stared at their failing screens. Ships that had been hiding rushed to escape, only to be cut down by Earth's kinetic strikes, smashing through them like meteors. On the Indomitable, Luis let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. We got it. We stopped it. Ilara nodded slowly, her voice low. That was too close. Back on Earth, Hale leaned forward, his voice cold. Send the message. A transmission shot across space, landing directly on Velox's desk. Hale's face appeared on the screen, his eyes sharp as blades. We saw your plan, Hale said softly. You tried to kill the messenger. You tried to burn Earth. We are done talking. Lay down your arms, or we finish this. Velox stared at the message, his claws shaking. Around him, his officers waited silently. And at that moment, the Zor Empire finally realized Earth wasn't just fighting back. Earth had already won. Velox sat frozen, his sharp claws trembling against the cold metal table. Around him, his top officers stared in stunned silence as General Hale's message replayed on the main screen. For the first time in Zor history, their empire stood on the edge of true defeat, not by accident, not by trickery, but by human strength. Outside, across Zor space, human ships remained in tight formation, weapons hot, sensors locked. On board the Indomitable, Captain Ilara Singh stood calmly at the bridge window watching the slow collapse of an empire. Luis whispered, They're not fighting back anymore. Ilara nodded slowly. They're waiting, but they know. Her voice dropped. It's over. Back on Earth, deep in the command center, General Hale folded his hands, his sharp eyes fixed on the live feeds. Flames still danced across shattered Zor docks. Empty ships drifted in space, powerless. On a dozen planets, Zor soldiers were laying down their weapons, or running. One of Hale's officers leaned close. Sir, incoming message. They want terms. Hale gave a slow, tired nod. Put them through. The main screen flickered. Velox's image appeared. The proud Zor Supreme Commander, now pale, eyes sunken, shoulders slumped. He struggled to hold on to the last bit of pride. You have defeated our fleets, Velox said quietly. You destroyed the dread sun. You shattered our command. His voice trembled. What more do you want? Hale's voice was calm but sharp. We want you to remember, you killed the messenger. You wanted to make Earth kneel. Instead, you made Earth rise." He leaned slightly forward. "There will be no second war, no hidden weapons, no rebuilding for revenge. You will disarm, step back, and leave Earth alone. Forever." Velox's mouth opened, but no words came. For a long, heavy moment, the only sound was the faint hiss of distant alarms on his side. Finally, slowly, his head bowed. "We understand," he whispered. Across the Zor Empire, surrender orders were sent out. Warships powered down, planetary bases raised white flags, and hidden weapons were revealed and dismantled. On Zor worlds, civilians poured into the streets, some weeping, some stunned into silence, as news spread that the Empire's reign of power had ended. On the Indomitable, Luis let out a long breath, sinking into his chair. "We did it," he murmured. "It's really over?" Ilara gave a faint smile, though her eyes remained sharp. "It's never really over, Luis. Not in the stars." Back on Earth, Hale stood at the window of the command center, looking up at the night sky. For a moment, his face softened. He remembered the early days, when Earth had been seen as the underdog, when no one believed they could stand against the mighty Zor. They had come so far, but deep in his heart, Hale knew this victory came at a cost. The messenger who was killed, the soldiers who never came home, the planets burned in the early attacks, none of them could be brought back. As Earth's fleets prepared to return home across human space, there was no celebration yet, only a heavy, quiet relief. And far away in the hidden corners of the galaxy, other empires watched. They had seen what Earth could do. They had seen what happened when humans were pushed too far. And in the dark, they whispered quietly among themselves, "Never underestimate Earth again." Months had passed since the Zor Empire surrendered. Across the galaxy, the ruins of war floated silently. In space, shattered ships, burned-out colonies, abandoned stations, but Earth was rebuilding fast. On the Indomitable, Captain Ilara Singh stood by the wide observation window, watching the repairs on the shipyard below. Workers in exosuits moved like tiny insects across the massive warships, welding, rewiring, restoring. Luis walked up beside her, a coffee in hand. "I heard General Hale's speech this morning," he said. "They're calling it the end of the war. Final victory." Ilara gave a small nod but didn't smile. "Final victory. Until the next threat shows up." Luis's grin faded. "You really think someone else will come?" She turned, her eyes calm and sharp. "They always do." Back on Earth, General Hale stood before the World Council delivering his final report. His voice was firm, measured. "We have secured peace with the Zor. Their fleets are dismantled, their weapons monitored, their empire broken. But Earth must not grow lazy. We must remain ready. The galaxy is watching, and we have shown our strength, but strength invites challenges." Some council members shifted nervously, others nodded grimly. As Hale left the chamber, a young aide caught up with him, holding a small tablet. "Sir, you should see this," the aide whispered. Hale stopped, frowning. On the tablet, grainy footage played, ships on the edge of known space, bearing markings no one recognized. Massive vessels, larger than anything Zor or human fleets had ever built. Strange energy readings, unknown designs. Hale's face hardened. "Where was this taken?" he asked quietly. "The Rim worlds, sir," the aide said. "A scout ship barely got away. We think they were observing the war." In orbit aboard the Indomitable, a sudden alert flashed across the systems. Ilara turned sharply. "Luis, what's that?" Luis's face paled as he read the data. "It's new ships, Captain, not Zor. Something else. They just appeared at the edge of the system. Alara straightened, her voice crisp. Sound general quarters. Prepare for contact. Across the human fleet, alarms rang out. Pilots rushed to their fighters. Engineers powered up the ship cores. Marines raced to their posts. Earth's war machine, just starting to relax, was once again on high alert. Back on Earth, Hale stood before a large window, staring up at the stars. His reflection in the glass looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. The eyes of a man who knew peace was only ever temporary. He murmured softly to himself, "They killed the messenger, and we brought them the apocalypse." He closed his eyes briefly. "If these new ones come for us," he turned, his voice steady and firm, "we will bring it again." Far away, in the deep cold of space, the unknown ships hung silently, watching, waiting. And so, even as the scars of one war healed, the next chapter was already starting to unfold. Because in the galaxy, one truth remained. When you challenge Earth, you must be ready to face everything they can unleash.